Welcome, everyone. This is Thomas and Jennifer.
Welcome to our deep dive into the myth of Medusa. You guys have sent us some pretty fascinating excerpts focusing on her story, and we're excited to unpack what makes her such a captivating figure, even, thousands of years later.
It's intriguing, isn't it? How this figure is so often reduced to, like, just a monster with snakes for hair.
Yeah.
She has really resonated through history.
Right. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. We're going to kind of go beyond that simplified image and uncover the layers of meaning behind her myth. We're talking divine affairs, seemingly extreme punishments, and the enduring power of femininity.
We'll start with the basics, drawing primarily from Hesiod's Theogony. In his telling, Medusa is one of the three Gorgons, offspring of these ancient sea deities. Phorcys in Ceto. Imagine these primordial beings embodying the raw power of the ocean, giving birth to these daughters.
Okay, so that paints a pretty vivid picture for us. But they weren't always monstrous, right?
Precisely. Hesiod describes the Gorgons as breathtakingly beautiful. So that makes Medusa's transformation all the more tragic. That contrast is really crucial here. It sets the stage for this dramatic fall from grace.
And that fall is linked to her encounter with Poseidon, the god of the sea. And not just any encounter. An affair that takes place within Athena's sacred temple.
Yeah, it's a transgression, you see. That speaks to the sanctity of these spaces in Greek mythology. To violate a temple, especially one belonging to a powerful goddess like Athena, was a grave offense.
So how does Athena respond to this?
Let's just say she doesn't exactly turn the other cheek. Medusa is subjected to a severe punishment, transforming her into this horrifying creature. The once beautiful hair becomes a writhing mass of snakes, and her gaze now possesses this power to turn men to stone.
That does seem pretty extreme, right? Turning someone into a monster for an affair.
It might seem that way to us, but it really reflects the power dynamics at play, not just between gods and mortals, but within the pantheon itself. Remember, Greek mythology is full of these power struggles, jealousy and retribution.
So we have this seemingly disproportionate punishment. But there's another twist, right? Pindar, another ancient Greek poet, offers a slightly different take on the myth.
Ah, yes. In Pindar's telling, there's a suggestion that Poseidon might have either seduced or even assaulted Medusa. It introduces a layer of ambiguity to the story. It raises questions about consent and agency that weren't explicitly addressed in Hesiod's version.
That's a really fascinating point. It makes you wonder if she was truly complicit or a victim of circumstance. Either way, the consequences were obviously devastating.
Absolutely. The original texts leave room for interpretation, which is what makes these myths so compelling. They invite us to ponder these complex issues even thousands of years later.
So we have Medusa, this figure transformed into a Gorgon, feared, ostracized. And then enter Perseus, our hero, son of Zeus, no less.
A classic hero's journey, wouldn't you say? And as is often the case in Greek mythology, Perseus doesn't face this challenge alone. He receives divine aid, a toolkit of sorts to help him overcome the seemingly insurmountable.
Okay, let's hear about this divine toolkit. What does he get?
From Hades, he receives the helm of invisibility, granting him the power to move unseen. Hermes bestows upon him the winged sandals, enabling flight and swift movement. And Hephaestus, the god of the forge, crafts a special sword perfectly suited for the task at hand.
This is shaping up to be quite an epic showdown. But the most crucial tool, if I recall correctly, is provided by Athena herself, right?
Exactly. Athena gifts Perseus with her reflective shield, a tool that proves instrumental in overcoming Medusa's deadly gaze. It's a clever strategy allowing Perseus to approach her without succumbing to the petrifying power of her eyes.
So armed with these divine gifts and a clever plan, Perseus sets out to confront Medusa. What happens next?
Well, remember, Perseus has the elements of surprise on his side. He uses the helm of invisibility to approach Medusa while she sleeps, the reflective shield protecting him from her gaze, and then, with a swift stroke of the divinely crafted sword, he beheads her.
It's a powerful scene, isn't it? The hero triumphing over the monster, fulfilling his destiny.
But remember, even in defeat, Medusa's story isn't over. In fact, this is where things get even more interesting. This is where her power takes on this new, almost paradoxical form.
Here's where it gets really interesting. So what happens after the beheading?
Well, you have to remember, Medusa had sisters, the other two Gorgons, and they were, well, understandably upset about her death.
Yeah.
They actually attempted to avenge her. But Perseus, thanks to that helm of invisibility, manages to make a pretty swift escape.
So he just flies away. That seems a little anticlimactic.
Not quite. See, as he's flying over Libya, drops of Medusa's blood fall to the earth. And from those drops, according to the myth, venomous snakes are born.
Okay, now that's more like it. It's like a scene straight out of like a fantasy epic.
Right.
But it's also a really clever way for the ancient Greeks to explain the presence of dangerous snakes in that region, huh?
Precisely. Myths often served as explanations for natural phenomena, weaving the fantastical with the world around them.
So Medusa's blood creates these snakes, but her story and her power, they don't end there, right?
Right. Here's the thing. Even in death, Medusa's severed head retains its petrifying power. And Perseus, resourceful as ever, realizes this. And he uses it to his advantage.
So we move from the hero slaying the monster to the hero wielding the monster's power. That's an interesting turn of events.
It is, isn't it? It highlights the complex duality often present in these myths. Nothing is ever quite so simple.
Can you give me an example of how he uses this power?
Well, one of the most famous examples involves his encounter with Atlas, the Titan who was condemned to hold up the heavens for all eternity. When Atlas refuses to help Perseus, Perseus uses Medusa's head, turning the Titan to stone, creating, some believe, the Atlas Mountains.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's a powerful image, the hero utilizing the monster's power to overcome another powerful being.
And it shows how, even in death, Medusa's power remains potent and impactful.
He also uses the head to save Andromeda, who's about to be sacrificed to a sea monster, right?
Yes. Perseus, once again, brandishes the head, turning the monster to stone, rescuing Andromeda from a terrible fate. It's a reminder that Medusa's power isn't inherently, good or evil. It's a force that can be used for both destruction and salvation.
Okay, so we've seen how Medusa's story unfolds, but what does it all mean? What can we learn from her myth?
That's the heart of it, isn't it? We can't simply take the myth at face value. These stories, they reflect deep-seated ideas about the world, about gender, power, punishment.
So let's talk about Medusa as a female figure in a world dominated by powerful male gods.
We have Zeus, Poseidon, Hades figures who wield immense power, often with very little consequence. And then we have Medusa, who is punished so severely for a transgression that, depending on the version you read, may not have been entirely her fault.
It almost feels like a cautionary tale, a warning to women not to defy male authority.
That's one way to interpret it, yeah. The fact that her punishment focuses so heavily on her appearance, the snakes for hair, the petrifying gaze, it further emphasizes this idea of female beauty as something to be feared, controlled, even demonized.
You mentioned earlier that the original texts leave room for interpretation. Is there anything else that stands out to you in terms of how we might read Medusa's story differently today?
Well, one element that's particularly interesting is the potential connection between Medusa's name and the ancient Greek verb to protect, to guard. It suggests a layered meaning to her character, a hint that perhaps she wasn't always solely a figure of terror.
That's fascinating. It almost suggests a transformation, a shift from monster to guardian.
Exactly. And that shift is reflected in how she's been depicted and reinterpreted throughout history. In some depictions, you see an emphasis on her beauty, even a sense of tragedy surrounding her fate.
It's like she's become this multifaceted symbol,
Yeah.
representing not just monstrosity, but also feminine power, the consequences of defying authority, and even protection.
And that brings us to a truly fascinating aspect of Medusa's legacy, her impact on art, literature, and popular culture. She continues to inspire and captivate us, doesn't she?
Yeah, it really is remarkable, isn't it, how a figure from ancient Greek myth can still hold such power over our imaginations even today.
It is. And, it's not just a passive fascination either. Medusa's image has been actively reshaped and reinterpreted across different cultures and time periods, taking on kind of new meanings along the way.
So where do we see this transformation taking place? Where does Medusa pop up outside the realm of ancient Greece?
Well, we can trace her influence through various forms of art, literature, even popular culture. Let's start with the ancient world, for example. You'll find some pretty striking depictions of Medusa in ancient Roman art, like the Medusa Rondinini.
I'm picturing a terrifying snake-haired monster.
Not quite. The Medusa Rondinini is a marble sculpture, but it presents a more nuanced image.
Yeah.
Yes, there are serpents, but they're rendered almost gracefully. And Medusa's face, it's actually quite beautiful, with delicate features.
That's so interesting, especially when you consider that her punishment was so directly tied to her appearance. It's almost like they're reclaiming her beauty even in death.
Exactly. It shows that even back then, there were these different interpretations of her story. She wasn't always seen as just a purely monstrous figure.
So we see this shift happening even in antiquity. What about later periods? How does her image kind of evolve over time?
Well, during the Renaissance, Medusa became a popular subject for painters and sculptors. Think of artists like Leonardo da Vinci and Caravaggio.
Hmm.
They were fascinated by her story and depicted her in various ways. Sometimes they would emphasize her monstrous nature, but other times the focus was on her beauty and the tragedy of her fate.
It sounds like her image could be adapted to explore a whole range of artistic intentions and styles.
Absolutely. And that adaptability continues into later periods. In the 19th century, for example, the Romantics embraced Medusa as a symbol of the sublime.
The sublime.
Yes. Think of the awe-inspiring power of nature, both beautiful and terrifying. That sense of overwhelming power, that's the sublime. And for the Romantics, Medusa embodied that perfectly.
So artists, like, say, Theodore Chérico, were drawn to her as a way to explore these powerful emotions.
Exactly. His depictions of Medusa are intense, full of drama and emotion. She's both beautiful and terrifying, a figure that evokes both fear and fascination.
It's incredible how her image can be used to represent such a range of ideas and feelings. Did this continue into the 20th and 21st centuries?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I'd say Medusa has become even more prominent in modern times, appearing in everything from literature and poetry to movies, TV shows, video games, you name it.
She's gone from ancient myth to, like, modern-day icon.
Precisely. And one of the most common ways she's portrayed is as a symbol of female power. Sometimes that power is presented as dangerous or destructive, but other times it's about resilience, about overcoming adversity.
Do you have any specific examples of how she's used in modern works?
Well, in literature, you have authors like Sylvia Plath and Margaret Atwood who incorporate Medusa into their work. They use her story to explore themes of female rage, the silencing of women, the ways in which society often demonizes female power.
That makes sense. Her story offers a really potent metaphor for those ideas. What about film or television?
She's a popular character in those mediums as well. You have the classic portrayal of Medusa as the monstrous villain in films like Clash of the Titans. But then you also have more recent adaptations that present a more sympathetic view of her character, exploring the complexities of her story and her motivations.
So she's gone from one-dimensional monster to this multifaceted character, open to this wide range of interpretations.
Exactly. It's like she's become this blank canvas onto which we can project our own anxieties, our own fascinations, our own evolving understanding of gender, power, and what it means to be a woman in the world.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the myth of Medusa, what can we take away from this journey through her story and her lasting influence?
I think the biggest takeaway is this reminder that there's always more to a story than meets the eye. Medusa is so often simplified, reduced to this monstrous villain, but when you delve deeper, you uncover this figure of immense complexity. She's a victim of circumstance, a symbol of female power, both terrifying and empowering.
She really challenges us, doesn't she? To question our assumptions, to look beyond the surface, to consider the multiple layers of meaning embedded within these ancient myths.
She does. And her story also highlights this enduring power of myth itself. These stories, they continue to speak to us across cultures and time periods. They offer insights into the human condition, into our fears, our desires, our struggles.
And Medusa's myth in particular, with its themes of beauty, power, betrayal, transformation, it continues to resonate, because it touches on such universal human experiences.
Absolutely. And it invites us to engage with these themes in a way that's both intellectually stimulating and emotionally resonant.
Well said. We hope this deep dive has given you a new appreciation for Medusa and the enduring power of myth. Perhaps it's even sparked a curiosity to explore other ancient stories and uncover the hidden depths they hold.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. There's a whole world of mythology out there waiting to be discovered.
Thanks for joining us on this fascinating journey.